makes no sense to spend $3 million per prisoner to keep open a prison that the world condemns and terrorists use to recruit. It's time to close Gitmo.
The president doubling down on his promise to shut down Gitmo. He says it will save lives and money. But aren't released Gitmo detainees who go back to the battlefield costing all of us a lot more in the long run? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Mr. Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Elizabeth McDonald, Sabrina Schaefer, Mike Ozanian, and Rick Unger. Steve, let's talk about the cost now. And clearly, a lot of those detainees in Gitmo who are released go back to the battlefield. Even Chuck Hagel has said that, by the way. He said, we know that some of the detainees that have come out of Gitmo have gone back to the fight, the battlefield. That means they are costing us a lot of money when they commit terror.
Well, that's right. And it's not just money, David. It's also the fact that what price do you put on those innocent lives that these terrorists then go back and take? And Gitmo is not a jail like it is in the United States. It's a prisoner of war camp. And by the way, the prisoners there are treated far better than most POWs were in previous wars. So the cost is not about cost. Closing Gitmo would be immensely costly because those terrorists do go back to the battlefield. And the idea that you can treat them like domestic criminals is preposterous. We did not read Miranda rights to Nazis on D-Day and anywhere else in a true battlefield. This is a war. Gitmo's a POW camp. Period.
Well, Rick, let's get back to what the president was saying. I know there are issues, and we can talk about them beyond the money, but let's just talk about the money. The president said we would save money if we release the prisoners, but the cost of just one terrorist act are enormous.
Yeah, I'm not going to support that approach, excuse me, because I don't think money's the issue here. Look, I have always had two primary issues with Gitmo. The first is I'm convinced it creates more terrorists than we keep out of the battle. That's my biggest problem. The second is I think it's fundamentally in violation of the way we as Americans treat justice. You've got people there who were not taken off the battlefield. They were taken out of their homes, maybe correctly, by the way. They are not charged. They do not get a trial. This is my concern.
Sabrina, I know there is a concern there. We'll talk about it, but the president is the one who brought up the money issue. He said we would save money by releasing these prisoners. What do you think?
No, I think in the short term, of course, you might save some dollars and cents, but in the long term, it's going to cost us much more in terms of lives and in money. I mean, also, these people have to be moved somewhere. If you're going to move them to a prison, it's not that that doesn't cost us something as well. So I think that's a very short-sighted argument. The larger issue is that this president has had his sights on closing Gitmo from the day he entered office, and he is determined to have those doors closed by the time he hands over the baton in January of 2017. The reality is, though, that he is completely delusional that we are facing very, very serious Islamic extremists, and that somehow he thinks that closing this will stop that. It is the issue.
Well, and Rich, you think of where a lot of these detainees originally came from. 76 of the remaining detainees are from Yemen. Yemen is the most mixed up, terror-filled country I know of in the world right now. It is causing problems on the southern tip of Saudi Arabia. Those are the people who would be released, the worst of the worst.
You know, I'm reminded when you say this of something Reagan said about the Cold War in the Soviet Union. He asked about his strategy to win the Cold War. He said it's simple. We win, they lose. That should be the attitude about terrorism. But I think that Obama makes one small point that is probably correct, and Rick mentioned it, that Gitmo, is a PR disaster. I don't know why you can't disperse these people in federal maximum security prisons, and if you have to use enhanced interrogation to get information that would save innocent lives, there are other ways to do that and other places to do that.
By the way, I disagree with you both on that. I think that, in fact, the terrorists would find plenty of other means to go to the battlefield if it wasn't for Gitmo. But, Emac, again, about the cost. Let's take the worst-case scenario, which is 9/11. God forbid there's another 9/11 attack here, but that thing, we are still calculating the cost of that. Some people put it in the trillions of dollars.
Yeah, trillions of dollars, you're right. Listen, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence said 30% of the Gitmo detainees have been released back into the terrorism battlefield. And by the way, if we put them in our prisons, they possibly could get lost in our prison structure or radicalize even more prisoners to become terrorists. So I think it's cheaper to keep them at Gitmo. It adheres adherence to international law. They face speedier trials under military commissions. And I'll tell you something, they are not criminals who should get Miranda rights, but they do get habeas corpus rights at Gitmo.
And Mike, I'd like to talk about this point about Gitmo radicalizing people. Remember, there was no Gitmo before 9/11. There was no Gitmo before the U.S. coal. There was no Gitmo before the terrorist attacks on our embassies in Africa. So I don't think that that argument has a lot of credibility. Do you?
David, it has zero credibility. It has as much credibility as President Obama saying the reason why he wants to do this is to save money. He's the most prolific president when it comes to spending we have ever had. Now, all of a sudden, he's concerned about saving a little bit of money at Gitmo, which actually saves American lives. It's preposterous.
Steve, do you credit at all the argument that Rich and Rick do, that in fact this is a PR campaign, a good PR campaign for the terrorists, Gitmo is?
I think it was pointed out earlier that no matter what they need, they're going to find something to use. Again, 9/11 happened before Gitmo. And by the way, Gitmo actually is something of a deterrent. Nobody likes the idea of going to that part of the world, being cut off from the rest of the world. So in terms, if you capture somebody and say you're on your way to Gitmo, I think you're more likely to get information out of them. So spending is preposterous. Stimulus, just think of the word stimulus. And two, this is a POW camp. This is not the traditional justice system we have at home.
And
so
Rick,
money's a bogus issue.
He
does not want to fight a real war against terror.
I understand, but Rick, we also have the problem of those who are released going back into the battlefield. Chuck Hagel has admitted it. There are studies that 30% of those who are released are either confirmed or suspected of returning to terrorism. I mean, it's not just an idle threat. It's not just hyperbole. This is real.
I don't question that for a minute. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if more than 30% go back. But American justice values. What about the other 70% being held without hearings, without trials? When they do get released, they don't go back. Doesn't excuse that they do. And look, I think we all agree we don't want to see one more bloody terrorist getting out there to make trouble for any of us in the world. But we're Americans, and we have to uphold American values at all times.
Well, Sabrina, I'm wondering if the president is upholding American values in terms of separation of powers, because what he showed by the Senator Bergdahl scandal, how he made the trade, was that he doesn't care about Congress. He doesn't care about what people, he just does what he's going to do.
No, in fact, there's definitely been people on the record who have suggested that he was testing the waters to see how far he could push it without Congress pushing back. I think that, we are sort of missing the larger point. The United States could sort of curl up in a fetal position. We could drop Israel as an ally. We could stop every kind of, inflammatory cartoon that's out there. We could do everything that they have on their little checklist. We can close Gitmo. It's not going to stop these terrorists from wanting to kill us. And it is the point, Rick. The reality is that
let me go back to Rich for a second, because we dealt with Rick on the second go-around. Rich, have we convinced you at all? I mean, there were a lot of terrorist attacks before Gitmo existed. These people didn't need any PR to get them to the battlefield before Gitmo.
It's so unfair of you to pummel me with the facts like that, David. Look, I think we should. I want to see more enhanced interrogation. You want to see enhanced interrogation? Let's do enhanced interrogation, but let's do it, in places that aren't so visible to the press. That then becomes a bad PR. You can do it in safe houses. You can do it in offshore,
but a lot of
other places. Let's
get the
Mike,
information. I want Mike to jump in, but a lot of congressmen, David, are saying, and state senators saying, not in my backyard. So we're spending a lot of money on those fights. It's immoral to have our soldiers and guys fight the same battle twice.
Gotta be the last word from Emac.